Hi, I'm Jan, ordinary citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and feeling ill at ease about many aspects of life here. To my mind, there's no real leadership and certainly no inspiring vision. We've got a few people who do really well, but many of us find it difficult to pay all the bills. We've become a nation of make-do rather than can-do. We struggle to provide a good enough health system, and we don't pay our school teachers enough. We have child poverty, youth suicide, and obesity rates that are high compared to other OECD countries. And we think that transitioning to a healthier, cleaner way of life is yet another burden to bear rather than an opportunity. So I've set about finding some thought leaders who have high hopes for our country and also good ideas for the role of the ordinary New Zealander in choosing a better future.
Our first guest is Dr Rod Carr, who's been the Vice-Chancellor of Canterbury University and a Chair of the Reserve Bank, among other roles. Most recently, he was the inaugural Chair of the Climate Change Commission and a Director at ASB Bank. These days, he's busy with his family business, which provides rooftop solar electricity to schools and councils mainly. Recently, he became a trustee of the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. Rod and his wife Jenny have 4 adult children, all living in New Zealand. They're expecting their 5th grandchild. When his grandchildren ask, "So what did you do about climate change?" Rod wants to say, "I did as much as I could. We stopped driving a petrol car. We stopped heating our house with fossil gas. We put solar panels on the roof. We stopped long-haul recreational flights. We reduced red meat consumption. And we put 14 hectares of regenerating native forest into a charitable trust to protect it forever. I wrote, spoke and advocated for emissions reduction by as much as possible, as soon as possible." All right, well, welcome, Rod. Thanks for being the inaugural interviewee of our new podcast series. I'm going to start by asking you, does New Zealand have the potential to be a thriving, equitable, inclusive society where everyone lives a dignified life?
Dan, I believe we do. I am convinced that due to our circumstances as an island nation, due to our relatively low population, due to our access to abundant, carefully used renewable natural resources, New Zealand absolutely has the potential to be a thriving, inclusive, equitable society in which everyone can live with dignity. It is our choice. And in many countries in the world, they don't have that option.
I believe actually that because we are small, we are unique, we have a unique opportunity, almost could be creating something that could be a blueprint for other societies. Would you agree?
A little. I don't think it's just that we're small, because there are lots of other small countries as well. But I think that opportunity is that combination of availability of resources, because you can be small and poor in resources, a desert island, but the availability of resources. We are a relatively highly educated society, so we can communicate. While we are diverse, we are homogenous enough to create critical mass and agree on some fundamental things. So I think it's just not being small, it is being us that gives us the opportunity.
Nice. Do you have a vision for New Zealand that you think we could all aspire to and actually achieve, not just aspire to?
I do, and I do think it is rooted in some aspects of Maori culture. I think it is rooted in the idea that we are guardians of the natural resources. We are not just the extractors and exploiters and degraders of natural resources. I think that the opportunity for New Zealand to create a novelty and uniqueness in how we live in our land and use natural resources in a sustainable way is very special to New Zealand. I also think that in order to achieve that vision of a thriving, inclusive future society, we're going to have some honest conversations about migration and integration and inclusion.
Can you be more specific about that?
There's some research which indicates that there is a kind of optimal rate at which societies can absorb new arrivals.
Yeah.
And it's somewhere around 1 to 2% per annum. And that if you get above that, you tend to get cliques and alienation. And if you get below that, you tend to get ossification and complacency. So I think immigration is important to New Zealand. It brings us new talents, new skills, new people, a different cohort of motivations. But I do think we've seen a period of extraordinarily excessive immigration, which has put stress on our infrastructure, on our societies and communities. And it was largely predictable that at that rate of immigration, communities would struggle to absorb and new societies would be less likely to be included. So, I think managing migration is important without alienating the people who are already here.
No, good. This is the big question, of course. What do we have to do in order to be able to realise the vision that you've outlined?
Well, I do think we have to accept that there's need for some sort of strategic, national level conversations and plans that to build an inclusive society and sustainable society in the use of natural capital, we've got to get over election cycles. And the way to do that is not by extending the term in office of a government. It's by making sure that as governments come and go as they will, there are some fundamentally agreed things about how we're going to organise our society and agreed objectives, such as that we do want a prosperous society. We don't want to go backwards, that we do want a society that isn't polluting the waterways that we live and use in, that isn't a society that is creating ground level particulate emissions that affect our health. So some fundamental kind of principles that we say is the backdrop against which our elected leaders can contest the how do we, not whether we will, build this society together.
So who does that? Who sets that up? Is it a government that sets that up, or is it what kind of body?
It's a coalition. I think it's a coalition of civil society, of corporates and businesses that can see the opportunity for them in being part of a sustainable, inclusive and thriving community. It is elected leaders too often these days are followers of opinion rather than leaders of opinion. And I think that's a challenge for us. We as voters have rewarded our elected leaders who pander to our short-term interests. And by changing the length of an election cycle, you won't change the outcome if we keep voting in leaders who offer us literally promises and prayers rather than practical plans. What it needs is bottom-up social demand from voters and consumers that this is the kind of society they will want to elect the leaders to lead. It requires the middle ground, the common ground, rather than polarization and extremes. It requires a belief that we are more like guardians than owners of natural capital. And it requires us to prioritize the medium term over the short term. And that isn't about a commission or a council or a prime minister or a political party. That's about society's wishes being expressed through the media, through the businesses we want to work for, through the products we want to buy, through the conversations we have.
So that just happens naturally if people are informed. Is that what you're saying?
I think it does. And then I think different actors can stimulate the conversation. So the lawyers will logically come at it from a point of view of legislation and regulation. The economists will come at it from a point of view of pricing of natural capital. The psychologists will come at it from the point of view of inclusion and well-being. There's a whole bunch of different fields of interest that will contribute to the conversation using different lenses on human society and behaviour.
And so once it becomes a trajectory, people get on board because there's only one way. Well, there is one good way, I suppose, but it's hard to get it going. And how would your assessment be of where we're at along that line?
On a good day, further than I expected. On a bad day, going backwards.
Yeah.
The reality is, compared to the 1970s, we've actually made significant progress in understanding the science of sustainable activity. Since the 1970s, New Zealand has become a more diverse and more inclusive society, and we are better off for it. Since the 1970s, our understanding and attitude to Maori and indigenous flora and fauna has progressed significantly. So, yes, that's 50 years, and for many people, it's beyond their life experience. But then you could look at the last few years, and there is a sense that we are losing ground. We are taking steps backwards from a bolder vision. But social change is not unidirectional. Social change tends to happen more like a corkscrew. You make some progress, you get ahead, you have a little bit of a change of direction. Some might call it a setback, some would call it a catch-up, and then you make progress again.
Because when, there's Lawyers for Climate, that's an organisation. I think about Pure Advantage, just done a lovely documentary series on, recloaking Papatūānuku. Yeah, and, so there's all these things that happen, but, I suppose just as an individual, I go, how does that all join up? Is it just good people doing little spheres of good work? But as you say, probably ultimately with the passage of time, this can become something.
Yes, I like to think of it as an overlapping and intersecting cloak rather than as a sheet of metal.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so basically you have explained my next question, which was, what is the role of the individual in making this happen? But you may want to just flesh that out a little bit.
I think there are, as I said, particularly for younger people, this is a really important question. That there is some evidence in the literature that the fossil fuel sector like the idea of calling it your personal responsibility, that you choose the car you drive, the travel you have, where you have your vacations, and we just supply the fossil fuels to you, but it's all on you, the individual. I think that's an obfuscation of the reality that many people actually have very constrained choices in how they live their lives, and the products and services that they can choose from are largely dictated by the providers of those products and services. But that said, talking to young people, I've often said to them, there are 3 or 4 things you can do that are in your gift to do. One is become educated and understand the issues of our time, how human activity impacts the environment and how the environment impacts your life and society and culture. Secondly, with that understanding, without becoming a radical, without becoming obsessive, advocate for the things you want to see more of. Advocate within your family, advocate within your community, that having the conversations is helping to develop society's understanding of the choices that we can make.
As Gandhi said, be the change you want to be, basically. Yes, yep. Sorry to interrupt.
I'd say, for young people, the businesses that you work in and the employers that you work for can be influenced by your choices about where you work and what you work at. And don't underestimate your ability to get leverage through your workplace, because that's something that I think employers are increasingly aware of, that to attract the best talent, to retain a motivated staff, particularly in the next generation, that generation wants to work with purpose for a purpose. So employment matters. What you consume matters. Every time you take out your credit card or buy something, you're voting for that thing to be put back on the shelf. If you don't want that thing to be produced, stop buying it. If you do want the other thing to be produced, buy that. Because the system is designed to replace the things we buy with the things we bought. So, and finally, I'd say, it does matter who you elect as your leaders. And it is important to be an educated voter. You can't say my vote doesn't count. Every vote counts.
Yes, and it's not just national, but it's local as well too, isn't it? Would you agree? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, adapting to the changing climate is inherently local, right? Because it is in your neighbourhood, it's on your riverbank, it's on your floodplain, and those are very local. I think if you look back through history, individuals have been able to make a difference, for better or for worse. So the idea that individuals don't count is simply not true in the history books. Secondly, if individuals make a difference, communities make a huge difference. What a community chooses to do with its scarce resources can make a huge difference. If you are in a community that values cycleways, values green spaces, values local produce markets, and is willing to support them with time as well as treasure, money, then those communities will have those things. If you are indifferent to them, then they will fade away. So I think individuals and communities can shape their neighbourhoods and make those neighbourhoods the kind of places where a diverse group of people want to live and learn and earn their money.
And that can influence other communities?
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely the case that, if you look at some of the Scandinavian countries, they've made choices for their societies. They haven't said the rest of the world should behave like them. No. But there are a number of countries that look at the way Denmark or Sweden have conducted their affairs, and they go, we quite like how that looks. Of course, forgetting that it took them 30 years to evolve from what they once were to what they are now. But the cycleways in Denmark are extraordinary. The opportunity to make a healthier, more mobile, less costly community by ensuring the infrastructure is in place for safe cycling is a no-brainer. But you and I individually can't go build a cycleway.
No, absolutely. Just on a personal note, Rod, do you feel at peace with or a sense of agitation about how much more there is to do? And just you personally, do you know what you need to do and achieve that, yourself? Do you think that you'll be able to leave the planet, leave the Earth, knowing that you've done as much as you can? This is just very personal.
It's a very good question, and I was encouraged to become the founding inaugural chair of the Climate Change Commission by my youngest of 4 children, because I said, I don't know that I've got the time to do this. And Christopher looked at me and said, well, this is the only thing that you should be doing. And it provoked me to think how little I knew about the climate and our impact on it before 2019. And almost everything I know about the science and the politics and the business of climate has been learnt in the last 5 years. And Christopher's observation was, well, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? This was knowable. You could have, should have known, but you were busy doing other stuff, right? And that was a choice. You centrally were willfully ignorant of something that was very important. And so that was the challenge that, my family put in front of me. And I think the way I frame that now is I think each of the next generation will at some point ask their parents, what did you know? When did you know it? And what did you do about it when you did? It's hard to hold people accountable for ignorance until you realize now that this is widely known and understood science, accessible to the broad middle class of educated people, and we are in danger of being willfully ignorant about the opportunity for example, decarbonisation through electrification, which is in New Zealand's own interest to get on and do. And fortunately, we're beginning to see traction and momentum behind that. We know that we need exercise as human beings, and we have built lifestyles that enable us to get little or no exercise. So need now to re-engineer our communities so that exercise is an integral part of how human beings live. We also know that we have created amazing abundance of access to sugar, salt, and fat, and that the ability to consume excessive amounts of calories has direct impacts on my health, your health, and the health of my family and neighbours. So again, we're willfully ignorant if we choose not to help our families adopt healthy eating habits. So and so I think there are now really interesting questions about what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it when you did. My personal activities are somewhat of the nature of the privileged middle class. We've chosen to have a battery electric car. It is a 2013 Leaf, so let's not get too carried away. We have chosen to put solar panels on our roof. Now, not every family has access to either the capital or the roof for which that's suitable. So there's no point in us telling everybody that's what they should do. In fact, only about 1 in 3 New Zealand houses are suitable for solar. So there's that. 40 years ago, with government funding, we established a farm forestry block in the Wairarapa. We've got 10 hectares of pine weeds, and we left the other 30 hectares as river flats and regenerating native bush. The kids want us to get rid of the pine trees and let the whole thing revert to indigenous native forests. So, not everybody is in the privileged position of being able to make those choices, but we are going to carve the section up, and we're putting half of it into a charitable trust. So in perpetuity, it will become a carbon sequestering indigenous forest. So again, that the kids are party to that and saying, we don't want the money, we'd much rather see the forest. So I think bit by bit, depending on farmers, for instance, who are covenanting land that is marginal at best in terms of agricultural productivity, and are working to allow that to regenerate as native bush, as a seed source, as a support habitat for indigenous bird life, and everybody isn't able to do the same thing. Some people do very little because they have few choices available to them. What we need in New Zealand is to get all those with choices to exercise those choices consistent with this thriving, inclusive, equitable, and sustainable society. And there are enough people in New Zealand with degrees of freedom and choices that we can create that society within my lifetime.
Yeah. So you feel excited about it? You feel that you're going to see some major change?
Yeah, I think the change is in the right direction. It will be a corkscrew, not a line. We'll go backwards and forwards, but we will make progress, partly because, in my view, our Indigenous Maori culture has got tools and insights that will help that progress.
But I truly believe also that we are fortunate for that reason as well too. Just a couple of little things. I think the media has quite a big role to play in all of this, because I do strongly feel that a lot of people don't know about rewiring Aotearoa and their policies. I don't believe that people know about Child Poverty Action Group, even that it exists and what their policies are, and it's informing people about what there is out there. So, I truly believe that communication and the media do have a big role to play in that. Your thoughts?
I agree, but I think mainstream media, the one-to-many mass market media, whether it's print media, radio, or mainstream TV, are struggling to find a business model that enables them to resource public education absent the advertising revenue that has gone into social media. And therefore, I think we may have unrealistic expectations of mainstream media and need to figure out how to harness social media for informative, constructive communications so that we get the many-to-many communications that will help and enable thoughtful, informed decision-making.
Because you were talking about a certain group of people who have the freedoms to make change in themselves, but for those who don't, even just to know that other good stuff is happening is really super important.
I agree. And for those people to have an expectation of those with the power to choose, to exercise the choices in the community's interest, not only in their own self-interest.
That's right.
Is actually really important.
Just one little specific thing, just with regard to solar, do you think there is any value in big subsidies for individuals, being able to put solar on their own house, like for the national grid and the whole?
So I don't believe that subsidies are needed either for household solar or electric cars. I think the business cases for those now work on their own merits. I think the risk of subsidies is you get regulations with subsidies. You have to have black letter regulation that says we'll subsidize this but not that, we'll subsidize it to this amount and not that amount, and they're subject to what's called regulatory risk, which is the next government changes the rules. So I think we're at the point with the electrification pathway that we need to make sure Transpower is adequately resourced and funded to maintain and build out the grid. I think we need to make sure the lines companies are adequately regulated and resourced to build out the lines. I think we need to make sure that the big gentailers are adequately regulated so they are not seen as a pseudo tax in the decarbonisation through electrification pathway. But I don't think subsidies are actually a healthy part of the dynamics of that system.
No, good. Is there anything else, Rod, that you would like to add? Or?
So, Jan, I'm excited about the opportunity to make a contribution, to give voice to some opportunities. But I would be positive that New Zealand can be even better than we are today if we choose to be.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Rod.